thank you to Sheila and Suzanne for organizing this series, and I hope the information provided here is useful for the work you are developing now for the transparency viewpoint regarding the update of your NDC. So I'll put my presentation in Teams. And I hope it's fine. Thank you. Well, the aim of this presentation is to give you some elements to reflect between the past BTR process and the ongoing NDC 3.0 process. For this first, I will quickly go through a summary of each part. And on one side, we have the BTR contents that probably you know that national inventory is required. Very importantly, information to track progress, or what is called the NDC tracking, and we need also to inform on capacity building support for developing countries. In the case of the NDCs, provisions included under the NDC. We had some instructions that NDC must be updated every 5 years, and we should account for the NDC and include domestic measures into the NDC to identify which are the targets countries are deciding to include into their NDCs. As such, from the point of view of the BTR and the NDC 3.0, there are some similarities and differences. We can say that while the BTR is a representation of the past and the present, so it's things that are happening or happened already, the NDC is, I call it a promise in the sense that it establishes a future, a new future, and there is a compromise of the country to go through this future that is updated regularly. But it's not an exercise of past or present, but an exercise of future. Now, if we follow this BTR and NDC 3.0 comparison, we can find the BTR uses rules established in the MPGs or in the IPCC inventory software, but also BTR shows results, because when we see a BTR, we look at an inventory with the real information from the country in the last year. We see how the indicators are evolving in time, or even how the projections are according to what we know so far at present. The BTR is also good to identify some missing elements. For instance, when we conduct or we are under the technical expert review, there is information that allows to complete our BTR with the information that the technical expert review team can offer, and also identify for the good of the country what are the capacity building needs that the country should go for a better reporting. But if we examine the NDC 3.0 process, we can find difference. Compared with the BTRs, the NDC is not a very standardized process. The outcome of the process is not reviewed like in the technical expert review, What is important is that the country can comply with having more ambitious NDCs in every cycle and without backsliding, but doesn't say the NDC how is this improvement should be done. No? There are also rules, but the rules, if you compare with the MPGs, the rules under the what is called the ICTU, or the information necessary for clarity, transparency, and understanding, is much less. And in particular, if you follow the decision 4/CMA1, which is the information necessary for clarity, transparency, and understanding, you will find some tables to follow that you should put as an annex in your NDC 3.0, but compared with all the information that is coming alongside the BTRs, you can see that there is a world of difference in terms of reporting. So at this point, we can have some initial conclusions regarding similarities and differences between both processes. For instance, in the case of the BTR, we can say that it matters both the result but also the process, because we or countries need to inform how the inventory, not only provide the inventory, but also inform how the inventory was created, what were the sources of information, if a quality assurance or quality control process was done. So it's not only think of numbers. But what is good is that all this process of the BTR can be useful to simplify the NDC. Probably when the previous versions of the NDC were done, all this concept of indicators was not very clear, but now with the BTRs, countries are much more aware of how important are indicators, so they are trying to make NDCs that are much easier to track with indicators that are not that complicated. The other thing that I consider useful is that the indicators, as you learn from the BTR process, are useful if you have data. No? If you have a very good set of indicators but don't have data to assess the indicators, then there is a diminished effect of the indicators. On the other side, on the other end of the road are the NDCs, no? But in the NDC, I would say that the outcome matters more than the process, in terms that it's not necessary to say how the numbers associated with the NDC were obtained, but it's important to say what are the numbers, no? The other element I think is important is that this is a process that will help for both cycles. I mean, although the cycle of the BTRs is a 2-year cycle, whereas for the NDC is a 5-year cycle, the next NDC will be useful for BTR2. So it's important all the conversations you will have around the NDC to also give a good input for the next cycle of BTRs. And I will say that what I see is, one is a better definition of the goal. All this BTR work that the countries have done, for sure, we make the NDC 3.0 better. Also, a better understanding of the NDC, because as we know that we need to do a tracking of the goals, of the targets of the NDC, we know that we need to identify the appropriate indicators. The third element, I think, is updating the information, because when countries prepare their previous NDC, probably it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So the information now is much more updated into the BTR. BTRs are giving us information from only 2 years old that is much useful than the information used for the previous NDC process. And finally, the streamlining of the indicators. As I said, this is a process, no? Indicators were not as relevant for the NDC preparation, but now become very relevant. So we have much more information of what type of indicators are more suitable for our countries. I think also there are other elements that are not so evident, links between these two processes, but still I wanted to give you as food of thought. For instance, to know more about the target, no? If the target was appropriate, was achievable, the cost of the target. Probably some of these elements were part of the first NDC conversation, but now with BTR data on the table is much. It's a better conversation of what the NDC if the NDC target is appropriate or is achievable, or how realistic were the costs associated 5 or 6 years ago to comply with the target. It's also important in terms of learning how far are countries from reaching carbon neutrality. This is an element of the Paris Agreement that some countries are working on preparing long-term strategies and eventually reaching carbon neutrality, but with information from the BTR, probably this conversation will be much more rich in terms of good data. And also, I think that the BTR process was useful to countries to understand on international support, on how, in practical terms, to account how the international support has gone to the countries, how useful it has been, and what can we expect from international support in the next years. In this slide, from a more schematic way, you can see here that some elements of the BTR process can be used or serve as an input for the NDC 3.0 process. I found a number of elements that are directly or nearly directly can be inputted into the NDC 3.0. So the whole idea is that there is a very intimate connection between the BTR information and NDC 3.0, and you don't need to start NDC 3.0 from scratch, but basically to use the information and not recreate information that your country already have it available. Finally, I wanted to provide some elements for discussion. I think this process, although has been very useful in terms of providing clarity for a number of elements, but on my personal opinion, I think that there are elements that still need some more discussion, and I think that the preparation of the NDC 3.0 will be particularly useful for countries to have their own conversation on how to increase the ambition, what can be done in practical terms to comply with this Paris Agreement statement. Also to align the country ambition with the science message that tell us that we shouldn't go further some levels if we want an stabilization of the temperature of the planet. I also think that this conditional and unconditional of the goal that was very popular on the NDC is a bit difficult to put into practice in terms of the BTR or in terms of the NDC compliance. So I think that the lessons learned from the BTR can also serve countries to understand better how can work these conditional versus unconditional targets. And also another element that was also very popular in the previous round of NDC is linking the conditionality to external support. How this work in reality, I think there are good information. There is good information in the BTR's teams, particularly in the chapters of finance, and to learn how this condition could be applied in more practical terms. And finally, I think that the baseline, several countries use an NDC under a baseline, but from my experience on looking at BTRs, the preparation of baseline was definitely a challenge for countries. So now is an opportunity for countries to review and see if the baseline approach is the best approach for countries in order to identify the next generation of NDCs. And with these words on how some doors opening and not closed, but that will be good for the conversation as a part of the new NDC, I'm closing my presentation. Thank you, and back to you, Susan.
Yes, thank you so much, Fernando. Thank you for this excellent presentation and then summarizing the kind of both the similarities and differences of these two processes, but also really highlighting that countries should really make use of the BTR exercise to better understand the NDC and really see it as an integrated process in countries. Yes, you have now the chance to ask any questions to Fernando, anything that you, any need for clarification, any comments, any thoughts. Please feel free to raise your hand, or you also feel free to post the question in your chat. So now it's time to engage. And of course, still think if you if you still need more time to think and structure your thoughts. I'll give you a few seconds, of course. And of course, you can. Oh yeah, okay, perfect. Yes, we have a question from Farai. Please go ahead, Farai.
Thank you very much. I managed to follow the presentation. I just wanted to ask whether there will be significant differences between the issue of conditionality of goals and conditionality of targets, because I think on the outstanding issues in NDC3, they were listed separately. I was having difficulties trying to split these. Conditionality, unconditionality of goals, then conditionality of targets. I thought they meant the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Farai. I fully agree with you that this concept of conditionality and inconditionality is a challenging one to differentiate. Although I think that from the country's point of view can make like a political sense to differentiate what is the effort that the country can do, and there is an additional effort only associated to external support. I think that in practical terms is a bit difficult to differentiate, but probably countries will continue using this approach because from the, I would say, political point of view, it makes sense to differentiate, particularly for for countries that relying on international support, to highlight that they are still needing additional support, and although they want to contribute with their own efforts plus the efforts from international support can make a better, outcomes.
Thank you, Fernando. Was that clear to you, Farai, or do you have any further follow-up thoughts or comments?
Yeah, at the moment, the explanation was very clear. I think maybe in our case, the conditionality normally comes kind of at the end when you already have a target. But so my major concern was to differentiate what a goal and a target, whether these will be two different items, particularly for purposes of listing them, or they could mean one thing.
Yes, okay, good. Thank you so much, Farai. Yes, we also have a question in the chat from John Kanna. How do we report on countries unconditional and conditional in the BTR as support received towards NDC implementation, as it is stated in most NDCs? So how's the reporting of the kind of conditionality done in the...
Well, in the case of Chapter 3 or Chapter of NDC tracking, in particular in the Common Tabular Format Table 4, it is possible to present in different lines the conditional target and the unconditional target. So in this CTF Table 4, countries can show what is how far are from the conditional target and how far are from the unconditional target. So the answer is lies in CTF Table 4 and how to put in different lines and make an assessment on progression.
Thank you, Fernando. Is this clear, John? I hope it was clear. Yes. Any other questions from the audience? If not, of course, you can still think and post them in the chats throughout. We have prepared a small quiz that Sheila will run, and after the quiz, we can have
We have a question in the chat.
Yes, but we took it, Sheila.
Okay. So
yes. Okay, if there's no further hands or questions, we can go to the quiz session that Sheila will run, and afterwards we will take the group picture that we forgot in the beginning. Sheila, please go ahead with the quiz. I can click. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Susan. I hope you can see the quiz. So this is the QR code, but these are the instructions. You can go to your www.menti.com and then you enter the code 68137152. It is the code for our quiz today. Kindly join the quiz. The code is 68137152. Thank you for joining. I can see a few people have joined. So go to www.menti.com. The code is 68137152. And see we have 4 people. Let me see how many actually are here with us. We have only 4 players. We are more than 20. It would be nice we have more people. Let me put back the instructions. Go to www.menti.com and you join in by putting a code 68137152. Thank you for joining. So we have more players. Thank you so much. We appreciate. Maybe we shall go with these 9 players so far. Let's go. These are questions that we have been learning since from our first webinar. So I hope they will be very simple for us, and let's go. The first question is that each party shall identify indicators, that is qualitative and quantitative indicator relevant to NDC to track progress, implementation, and achieve its NDC. Is this true or false? I think at this stage, we should all be very clear. Yeah, thank you so much. I can see most of you got it right. I don't know where the other players are. I think it was moving so fast. Let's go to the second question. Can see now we are 13. This is good. So we can go to the second question. Each party with NDC that has mitigation co-benefits from adaptation actions and economic diversification plans shall provide information on domestic policies, measures implemented to address social and economic consequences. Another option is national circumstances as well as social and economics. And then another one is saying activities implemented to address adaptation impact. So the right answer, I think the timer is moving very fast. The assumption was that most of us are already familiar with these questions. I hope I got it wrong. But the right question is, this is a shall. So if an NDC has mitigation co-benefits from adaptation actions and economic diversification plans, parties are required to provide more information on domestic policies, measures implemented to address social and economic consequences as a result of implementing those actions. I hope we shall be faster than that. Thank you for joining. I can see the number is increasing. Question 3, I hope the timer is not moving as fast. In which part of the NDC CTF table do parties provide information on goals or stroke targets? The CTF tables, which part is that? I hope at least all of us should be able to answer this. Thank you. I can see 12 people have already answered. So most of the time, the information that is required under appendix is where we provide information on targets and goals for our NDCs under the CTF. So appendix is a summary of most of the information in our NDC, and usually it is the first part of the CTF that we are supposed to fill. So please get that one very right. That's where we fill the goals, the targets, and then from there, then we are able to also fill information on which indicators for the targets as we go along. So this quiz has decided to give us the quiz lead at this stage. I can see Tapua is leading, but we have also other colleagues performing very well. So let's go to our fourth question. Mandatory reporting for mitigation in BTR include information on indicators. Which section of CTF is this information presented? And as you may be aware, this is a shall, where in which CTF table do we report indicators? We have different options here. Yeah, so of course, this was also part of the previous presentation. We usually report indicators in CTF1, where they're asking the description of the indicators, also CTF2, and then of course 4, where you go further ahead to provide how you are progressively tracking your indicator. Yeah. Table 1 requires that you provide the indicator, and then table 2, description of your indicator, and then part of table 4, you provide the indicator here, and then also you provide more information on how you're tracking the indicator. Question 5, I can see we are ready. 14 of us are ready. Let's see. In which part of the NDC CTF table do parties provide information on policies, actions, and plans? Are the PAMs? In which part, CTF 4, 5, or 6? Time is running so fast. Wow, I can see most of us have got it very right. So it is in CTF table 5. That's where we report information on policies, measures, actions, and plans. I know as we develop more of the NDC, of the BTR, as we shall learn more about where some of these, the information required are in these tables. So our last question is here. Please mention some of the content in your BTR that you will use in your NDC development of NDC 3.0. You can just mention, can just type. Time is running so fast, but we still have more time. Some of the information in your BTR that you will use as you develop your NDC or update your NDC. Only 5 of us have been able to answer 6. Let's see. So we but we have right answers. We have targets, institutional arrangement is right, JG missions is right, but they are ticking just because I had lumped them together. So the right answers, some of the inventory results, projection results, some part of the chapter on national circumstances and indicators, and then also, of course, the tables and the financing part. I don't know why they are not ticking, just because I had lumped them together. Thank you. So I can see this person is the one who has won the quiz. Congratulations, and thank you so much for joining today's quiz. So Susan, I hand over back to you. Maybe I can go ahead and we take a photo. We can switch on our cameras, turn on your cameras, please. We'll take the photo. Please turn on your cameras. We need to see your faces.
Don't be shy, colleagues. It'll be great to see you all.
So on my side, I don't see many cameras, but I will try as much as possible to take the photo I can. I can take another photo. Thank you for joining. Thank you for the smiles. I've taken the second photo. Thank you so much. I will hand over to you, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you for running the quiz, and thank you all for participating in this engaging exercise. Yes, now we are turning to the presentation from countries, which I'm really looking forward to. And yeah, thank you again, colleagues, for from Zimbabwe and Ghana to volunteer to share your experiences today. So I will now give the floor to Mr. Piwa Junior Kamuroku and Farai Mapanda from Zimbabwe to share their experiences on the BTR and NDC development processes from their country, from Zimbabwe. Yeah, please go ahead, colleagues, and thanks again.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Thank you, Sheila, and thank you, Fernando, for that elaborate presentation. That has truly provided a better understanding on the linkages between the BTR process as well as the NDCs, that they're not disjoint, but it's one of the same. One feeds into the other. And before highlighting our experience, particularly on Chapter 2, the NDC tracking, which will be presented by my colleague, Professor Mapanda, I thought it best to highlight that Zimbabwe were one of the countries to meet the deadline to submit our first BTR by the deadline of the 31st of December, and we did that together with our 5th national communication. I know the timing was a bit, I don't want to use the word stressful, but it was a mammoth task, but we managed to pull together and submit. And shortly after we had to submit our NDC 3.0 country statement 2 months later, of which we also managed to do as one of the only countries to meet that deadline as well. So I want to really applaud the team that we have here in Zimbabwe in managing, allowing us to meet all those reporting obligations. So our process was, as most countries are similar, I would assume so, that we're the team. First of all, maybe to highlight that reporting to the UNFCCC is under the Ministry of Environment, of which I'm a part of the Climate Change Management Department. And we are the ones that report on BTRs. We are the ones that coordinate NDC implementation, amongst other climate actions to ensure that we meet our commitments. So when this process began of developing our NC5 together with the BTR, we first, of course, with the planning, and then we had to procure a coordinator who was going to be steering the ship, guided by a project management unit, before we then procured the key consultants that were going to develop the various chapters of our BTR process. And after all that was in place as part of our institutional arrangements, I would say, to begin the process, the first thing was a stock-taking exercise, where we were to review our existing data and information related, of course, to the country's NDCs, that's NDC 2.0. I was in a meeting recently, and terminology is now a bit challenging, because our previous NDCs, we called it our revised NDC, but now it's being referred to as NDC 2.0 because of the reporting cycle modalities. But anyways, we're to review that information that is there, and also the climate actions that are there, as well as the progress towards this target. That process was key because it then shaped the following sectoral meetings for data collection and management, because it informed the meetings that we had with our data providers, our data compilers, and how we're going to collect that data using the various data capturing methods. And us were very fortunate because the data capturing methods were developed by our CBIT1 project. As such, the tools were there, and it was a matter of operationalizing them to get the required information to develop our BTR1. And then, of course, after with all that information, we had to put it together, and then our consultants then went into work, being guided, of course, by the UNFCCC guidelines, the MPGs, which was a bit challenging because the terms that are there, it took time for us to really understand what do they mean when they want this in this chapter. How was this information separate, for case in point, for the national circumstances, how each chapter should have its own national circumstances, which was different from the BUR. So it took time for us to understand, but we managed to pull through and have that guidance as well for the CRT tables in Chapter 1 when we were developing our NIR, but we managed to do that, and our consultants developed the chapters with the validation and then managed to submit. And now going into depth on the process itself on Chapter 2, I would like to invite my colleague, Professor Mapanda, to share our experience as Zimbabwe. So over to you, Prof.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Kamuruko, and good afternoon, everyone. I will put off my camera because of the poor bandwidth here, but that is me. So basically, I will share with you our experiences with regard to NDC tracking. I think administratively, Tapua has already highlighted that we started a little bit late, which is very important to make sure that we should also always make sure that we manage our time to spread our tasks. so that we don't work under pressure. I think we learned the hard way, specifically on this one. But the planning stages, I think they were fairly well done. We had an inception, we had consultants that were engaged to do the task. And these were largely the sector experts and the technical lead. So basically under NDC tracking, we were tasked with the tracking 17 mitigation measures that we have in our NDC2. And these targets were looking at the measures that are in all the IPCC sectors, energy, IPPU, AFOLU, and the waste sector. So what we did was we had a lot of consultations that were undertaken, particularly by the individual experts, to try to generate information. But I want to also take this time to thank, we had the CBIT project, which had also helped us quite a lot, because when we initially had our NDC2, I think we did not have specifically indicate, we didn't specifically indicate the issues to do with the indicators. They were not well elaborated. And so it through the CBIT program, I think we managed to look at every measure one by one, just to try to see what are the indicators that we can actually use during the tracking process. But our NDC2, the background to it is that when it was formulated, some of the measures that were put in place, I think the extent to which the consultations were done were a bit limited, to the extent that when you now try to track, you will see that sometimes you have difficulties getting information, particularly because some of them had not taken off, and some of them, of course, they were still having time before implementation, and some of them did not have any information at all. So, for example, if we take the energy sector, where we have about 8 measures, there we only managed to track, I think, 2 of them, where we had difficulties in some of the measures that were put in place. But what we learned there is that I think when we, particularly for the NDC3, we learned that we really need to make sure that we have projects which are well-timed, which are also compatible with the methodologies that are available. Otherwise, you won't be able to track any measures. So I think we were a bit high on the ambition, but in terms of the implementation, we had some challenges. I think that is one thing that we have learned. And then if we go to the IPPU sector, which had about 4 measures, we did manage 3 of them, just to track them. And again, the 4th methodology, I think it had not, the 4th measure, it had not yet taken off. And the agricultural sector in the NDC2 did not have a specific mitigation measure. But of course, we do have under adaptation some measures which have got some mitigation core benefits, which include the climate smart agriculture, the conservation tillage, but they were not put in as the measures in the NDC. Particularly, they were not part of the 40% target that we set ourselves as a country. So we had measures in the LULUCF, or land use change and forest sector. We had about 4 measures, and some of them common ones to do with increasing the forest area, reducing the area bent. What we also noted when we were tracking is that the narration of the measures, I think, didn't give us enough room to be more specific. For example, it talked about reducing the area bent, but as we know, we have specific areas that are bent in the forests, in the grasslands, and also on cropland. And when we have a measure which has got a lumped targets like that, it becomes very difficult, which I think we have also taken on board when we were doing our NDC3, the ambition. the country statement, I think we did manage to now separate these to do with biomass spending in different land use categories. Just from what we learned in the tracking process, that it is very difficult to track. Maybe also still in the Afolu sector, what we also noted was that the methodology that we were using, where we were actually computing the changes in area, were not also very much compatible with the tracking process. For example, we're using map-based methods where you actually compare the different areas change. You use one map of a particular year and another year, maybe 10 years or so, 20 years after. Then you try to compare the changes that are happening. So because of that methodology, it has or it generates the deforestation rates, which are constant, that you can use maybe for a series of years. And when you now try to track how much you have improved through the mitigation measures, it was quite difficult. I think in the revised NDC, we have also tried to move away from other methodologies that are generic, like the tier 1. We are trying now to use the sample-based method through the collect earth methods to quantify this, so that we can actually track our measures, the impact of the measures in terms of reduction of the emissions. And then in the waste sector, what we noted was that when the NDC was formulated, it was referring to, there were two measures in the waste sector. One of them was to do with composting, and the other one was to do with waste to energy projects. But the one on composting was largely based on one specific target, which was located in a particular part of the country, which is the Harare, the capital. But when the modeling was done, it talked about 20% of the organic matter being composted for that particular project. But when the modeling was done, it looked at 20% countrywide. So now during the process of tracking, because you always have to go back to the implementer of the, or the owner of the project or of the measure, then we found that the amount of progress that has been made were actually less than 1%, simply because of the catchment that we were looking at, because the target was set at national level, which is what we have also tried to correct now in our NDC 3, to try to scale that up so that we can actually meet our targets. So generally, what I can say is that we, in our NDC 3, we now have 27 measures relative to 17 measures that we had in our NDC 2. And the information that we found out was that when we look at our NDC 2, when we were targeting 40% by then, if you try to compute that using the current matrices, it means that we are only going to achieve about 32% reduction just by theoretically looking at the potential of each measure. So simply because of the changes in the matrices, the methodology in the IPCC, when you just try to do some recalculation, then you see that you are falling short even before you talk of NDC 3. So what we have done is we have added these additional measures, but our target has remained or has been also 40%. But the absolute emission reduction now are the ones that we have actually raised ambition on. You see, the quantities are actually relatively high compared to the previous ones. So I think as a process, we have quite learned a lot, particularly on how you should set your targets in the NDC so that you don't have problems with tracking of that. And we do have as a country an NDC implementation plan that we're supposed to follow, but also when you look at the way the indicators were crafted, I think some of them may not really tally with what is required under the NDC tracking chapter. So we also had to try to moderate so that we make sure that the indicators and the sort of tally so that you're able to track. And I think one of the things that we have learned is that when you are tracking, sometimes you better limit yourself to a small number of indicators that you use. Otherwise, if you pick too many of them, you also have got challenges, particularly with issues to do with the data, because at some point you'll be having a measure with 6 indicators, but what you can actually track maybe 2 or 3 or even 1 in some instances. So I think in brief, I hope that aligns with the experiences I'm supposed to discuss with you, but you can guide me if I should talk about something in another dimension. Thank you very much, Madam Facilitator.
Thank you so much, Sarai, and thank you so much, colleague Junior. Thank you so much for all these insights from Zimbabwe, and then I think that's really interesting. Also, thank you so much, especially for highlighting all the challenges you faced and the kind of the learnings you've taken from all the challenges in the BTR and then in the development of NDC 3.0. And congratulations to your country team on submitting the BTR on time, but also submitting the country statement NDC 3.0 also in line with the deadline. So this is really commendable. Thank you so much, colleagues. This was really insightful. So maybe we can take the questions, maybe if there's any immediate questions, otherwise we can take the question after the next presentation, in the next Q&A session. If there's any immediate need for clarification, we can take it. You can of course also post in the chat, and otherwise we take it in the Q&A session afterwards and can have a bit more elaborated discussion. I don't see any questions at the moment. Okay, so I guess people are still digesting or still thinking, or everything was really clear. So maybe then we can move. Thanks again, colleagues, and then maybe now we can move to the next country experience sharing, namely from Ghana, with Ms. Uyana Bempa. Thank you so much for joining us today and for volunteering to share your experiences here. And I'll give the floor to you, Uyana. Thanks so much.
Yes, good afternoon from Ghana, good morning, and then good evening, depending on where you're joining from. If I can be given access to share my screen, and then I can go ahead and then share my presentation.
Let me try. Maybe Sheila, as you are the owner of the meeting, can you make Uyana a presenter? Something I'm able to do that.
Let me try.
Just a second, colleagues. So I think Uyana should be able to share. Yes, perfect. Please go ahead. Thank you. Does it work, Uyana, or is it still?
Yeah, it's not working. Just a moment. Let me try
Yeah.
again. It's not working. Other than that, let me quickly share with Sheila, and then she can project from your end.
Okay, yeah, that's also a possibility,
I
of
think
course.
that works better. Yeah.
Yes, okay, let's let it do
Let's do
that.
that now, and then Sheila can quickly.
Yes.
And
Good.
So, Sheila,
In the
absent
meantime, in the meantime, I had posted a question to Professor Mapanda in the chat. He can be answering as I get it.
Yes, thank you, Sheila. I'm just reading out the question. Thank you so much, Team Zimbabwe. I would like to know if you have a database that we'll be using to track your NDC, considering the challenges you mentioned. Is there any database that you have in the countries to track the different measures as per your NDC? I know, Farai, maybe do you want to answer or?
Sure.
Yeah.
We do have. Yeah, maybe Kamuroko, you can take this one because it is in your custody. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Prof. Yes, we currently have a database that we have been developing over the past years, a greenhouse gas information management system with a component of NDC tracking. So that has been, we started developing that from our ICAT1 project, of which was then absorbed by our CBIT1 project to further refine it. And in this cycle for NDC 3.0, this is where we really want to operationalize this system. And hopefully, you know, once we panel bit one or two areas, it's going to be our primary database of system that we'll be using, or tool here locally in Zimbabwe that we'll be using to assist in tracking of our NDCs. So it's called a greenhouse gas information management system with an element of NDC tracking. So that is what we're hoping to operationalize in this next cycle of BTR2 as well as the NDC 3.0.
Perfect. Sounds really good. Thank you so much for explaining this, Tapiwa, and really good that you have such a system and really plan to operationalize it. I think that will really facilitate in the NDC tracking and BTR exercise. Are you also planning to do a follow-up CBAT project? Just out of curiosity, because a lot of measures have been taken, have been put in place through the CBAT1 project, as you have mentioned. Is there a CBAT2 project in the pipeline or in planning?
Yes, that is in the pipeline. We're just finalizing the closure of the CBIT1 project. You know, as the project closes, there are the audits, the final, you know, bolts and knots that we need to tie up. But the process of applying for the CB2 project we've begun, and hopefully we'll be awarded to begin it in the next calendar year. So that's what we're aiming for. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for elaborating on this. Really useful. Yes, maybe Sheila, are you ready to share the slide from Juliana, or?
Hello, Sheila.
Sheila, are you with us still?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I see it coming up now. Okay, perfect. Yes.
Okay. So let me put off the camera so that we can just focus on the presentation. All right. So I would take this opportunity to say a very big thank you to our colleagues for inviting Ghana to share our experience on the processes that we have gone through in developing our BTR, as well as some results so far as the BTR1 is concerned. Next slide. Okay, so in this presentation, I'll be walking you through the process that we went through in preparing our first BTR and its accompanying document. I'll also highlight on the historical GHG emission profile, the projections that we did, the NDC mitigation target, the policies to achieve those NDC targets, the progress that we've made so far, and then the role of cooperative approach in NDC, and then some lessons learned if time permits. Okay, so in preparing the BTR, it's actually took us to really activate the functionality of the GCAP, which is Ghana's Climate Ambitious Reporting Program. And this dates back in 2013 when the system was developed. It looks at institutions and their roles, the legal basis for development of the reports that we have to submit to the UNFCCC. It looks at data, methods, and IT. That is the third pillar. Then the very last pillar looks at skills and then the scope. So we had to activate the functionality of this GCAP system before we were able to start developing the BTR. We also sought for support and collaboration from local and other partners so far as Ghana's commitment to climate action is concerned. The entire process was very much participatory, where we drew on the best available national data that is grounded in scientific principles, in that we have developed a number of reports that are based on scientific grounds. And so we had to also leverage on some of these reports. We took a duration of about 18 months to be able to come up with the BTR and its the GAG inventory, as well as its accompanying document. The initial concept that we did was to submit a concept, and then we also tried to mobilize resources for the development of the BTR. If you take a closer look at Ghana's BTR, it provides you with an up-to-date information that was based on the BUR4. So we didn't start from scratch, but with the BTR4 that we had developed, we used that as a stepping stone to be able to develop the BTR. The funding was actually from Jeff, and then the vehicle that was used for disbursing of the funds was from UNEP. This, in effect, was to have make sure that we have a very fruitful partnership towards sustainable development. And again, we also looked at the teams. As I mentioned to you, the GCAP focused on institutions and their roles. So we set up a very good team that is very much well oriented in this space. And when that was done, we also ensured that right from the onset, we had a very good stakeholder engagement process, because when it comes to data mobilization, we had to leverage data mobilization from these key stakeholders. And so we engaged them, we walked them through the process based on the CBIT1 projects that we had developed. And so they had some knowledge on the development of the BTR. And then we went ahead and did the analytics. We went through the technical analysis. We did the drafting of the NIR and the BTR document, after which we compiled the reporting tables using the ETF2. And then we ensured that the submission was done. But prior to submission, we had the validation. We did the validation workshop, and then we took some comments from the stakeholders, and all these were incorporated into the report. And then we also have the Ministry of Environment, Science and Technology walking us through an approval process, where the Ministry of Environment approved the report, and then we submitted it electronically. Next slide, please. So this figure summarizes everything that I have discussed with you, right from the support from Jeff, to team formation and stakeholder engagement, to data mobilization and archiving, and then the kind of methodological choices that we made so far as the inventory and other sections are concerned. And then we also looked at the analytics, and then completion of the different tables, the CRT and then the CTF table. And then we also ensured that we had informal reviews prior to we having our validation workshop, so that all stakeholders would have their comments incorporated into the report prior to submission. Next slide, please. Okay, so Ghana actually has a very detailed domestic UNFCCC reporting regime. I mentioned to you the GCAP. We look at institutions and their roles. So we have a very well-established national institutions. We have the EPA being the UNFCCC focal point. We have the focal point at the Forestry Commission, which deals with REDD+ issues. We have the Ministry of Finance also looking at GCF issues and then the JEF disbursement. We also have adaptation focal person that sits also at the EPA. The technology NG also sits at the EPA. We also have the Article 6 office also being an EPA, and then the thematic and other sector contact point also being at relevant ministries, departments, and agencies. The second pillar of the GCAP looks at the legal basis. We wouldn't have been able to come up with a BTR and all the inventories if we don't have a legal system backing the EPA, the ministry, as well as the other institutions. And just this year, we had the EPA Act being repealed and replaced with Act 112 for 2025, and that has a whole part 5 from section 144 to 159, discussing issues or the mandate of different institutions so far as climate change issues are concerned. Again, we have some other relevant policies and also other areas that also gives the EPA the mandate to be able to report on climate change issues. Next slide, please. Okay, so drawing on the section 149 of the EPA Act, it mandates the EPA to coordinate international climate reporting regime, and that is how come we're able to develop or have been complying with Article 12 of the Convention and also Article 13 of the Paris Agreement. So far, we have been able to submit a number of reports. At the time of submission of the BTR, we submitted the 6th National Inventory Report, and we have also, since Ghana is also engaged in Article 6, we have gone through our first initial report review, and then we have also submitted quite a number of reports. The BUR we submitted up to the 4th, prior to we submitting the first BTR. On the inventory, we submitted the NID with the common reporting tables based on the MPGs. And then we also use the ETF tool in doing our calculations. Next slide, please. The GHG inventory approach, on the methodology, we use the IPCC 2006 guideline as well as the 2019 refinement, and then the software, the IPCC software was also used. However, we have actually customized the software in a way that we are able to use it for our national calculations. And we also used the reporting tools from the UNFCCC. On the economic sectors, of course, we focused on energy, transport, industry processes, agriculture, forestry, and then the waste sector. The gases, we also did looked at CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, PFC, HFC, SF6, and then NF3. These are the gases that we looked at. Then on the timeline, the base year for Ghana was 1990, the latest year being 2022, and then the reporting year 2024. And on the projections, we have the projections up to 2040. But kindly know that the year for the projections as the base year was 2022. The global warming potential that was used was expressed in tons of CO2 equivalent. We used the AR6 for a 100-year period and then as well as a 20-year period. On the report, we submitted our NIR, which includes our NID, and then the CRT. We submitted BTR, and then the NDC CTU tables. We've also submitted the FREL and then the initial report and annual information. Next slide, please. Okay, so taking a deep dive into our historical emissions, if you look at 1990, Ghana's emissions was around 17.4. And then by 2016, we had increased our emissions to about 40.2. And as at 2022, the emissions had again increased to 54.8. And looking at it as in percentage share, this is an increase. If you look at 1990 to 2022, is an increase of about 214%. And this can be attributed to increase
We can't hear you clearly, Iliana.
increases, GDP increases as. Next slide, please. Okay, so the energy sector, according to the latest GAG inventory, has the highest emissions, and this is keenly driven from the road transport and the electricity generation. On gas attributed.
Iliana, you're falling out a bit.
About 21%. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you. It's a bit on and off. Let's see if it.
Sorry.
Better.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So the agricultural sector contributed about 21% of the entire emissions. Next slide. Okay, so this is also a breakdown of emission contribution by sector for 2022. We have electricity generation being 15% of the total share, followed by transport, which contributed 90% of the total share. And this was also followed by land use, 12%, and then livestock contributing 10%. And for the different subcategories, you can find it at the left-hand side of the slide, with stationary combustion contributing 21.3%, agriculture contributing 21.9%, with the others following in that order. Next slide, please. Again, this is a slide that also shows the share of GHG emissions per gases. We have CO2 being the highest, that contributed about 43%, followed by methane, that was 36%, and this was followed by PFC emissions from the IPP sector, that contributed also 29%, and then we have HFC emissions, again from IPPU contributing 28%, and then nitrous oxide contributing 17%, and lastly, SF6 emissions contributing 15%. And we have all the different sector contribution also for each of the gases listed under them. Next slide, please. After which we did a key category analysis, and this slide shows the top 10 key categories, and these were basically from the energy, from the agri, waste, and then the land sectors. We did the analysis based on the approach 2 and approach 1, both level and trends, with different areas of contributing or sectors contributing as key categories. When it comes to the combined key category analysis that was done, we have only 10 of them being seen as the key category that needed to be focused on. Next slide, please. Okay, on the projections, we looked at 3 main scenarios: with measures, with additional measure, and then without measures. So if you look at this again, I mentioned to you that for the projections, the base year was 2022, and then we had the projections up to 2040. And so the total effect of the policies, actions, and measures and projections, we have without measure scenario as the base year emission increasing by 428% by 2040. And then when there is with measure scenario, the base year emissions will be increased by 207% by 2040. And then with additional measure scenario, the base year emissions would increase by 67% by 2040. And then we also compared the without measure and then with measure. And then when we did that comparison, we realized that we had 42% potential emission reductions by 2040. And then when we also did the without measure versus the with additional measure, we also realized that this comparison, there's going to be 68% potential emission reduction by 2040. So these were the kind of scenarios we looked at, and then we also looked at its projection in that regard. Next slide, please. So on the NDC GHG mitigation target, we have 2030 as our target as every other country or most countries, and the emission reduction potential by 2030 is supposed to be 64 million tons CO2 equivalent. With our unconditional targets, we looked at 9 policies or policy measures, and with that, there's the potential to reduce 25 million tons CO2 equivalent based on our own domestic measures. However, with external support, looking at the conditional target, we intend to reduce our emissions by 9 million. We also intend
Yeah, now I still,
Yes, I think the line I had a little bit of a hitch. Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, so we're also looking at how we can use carbon market or Article 6 to be able to achieve part of our conditional target. And we're looking at reducing our emissions by 24 million tons CO2 equivalent with Article 6. Next slide, please. Okay, so on the policies measures that support our NDC target, we're looking at, could you please go back again? Hello, Sheila. Yes, on the PALMs, we focused on 12 main policy actions in the areas of energy, oil and gas, IPPU, waste, forestry, and then transport, where different policy actions were taken into consideration. Next slide. So currently, after the time that we did the analytics, we realized that overall, the NDC progress that we have been able to achieve is about 45%, and we have been able to reduce our emissions by 28.7 million tons CO2 equivalent. And then how does it translate into both our tier 1 and then tier 2 NDC progress? We realized that if you look at the unconditional, we have done 63%, and then with a conditional, we have done 33%. And for the conditional, it translates to about 13.2 million tons CO2 equivalent. And then with the unconditional, it translates into about 15.5 million tons CO2 equivalent. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is the role of Article 6 in achieving our conditional NDC target. So as I mentioned earlier on, we're looking at 39.4 million tons CO2 equivalent reduction by 2030. Currently, we have been able to authorize about 5.9 million tons CO2 equivalent. That is the authorization that we have done so far. And these are around the sectors of waste to compost. We also have rice cultivation. We have cook stove, and these are the projects that have been authorized. But the latest one that was authorized was on e-bikes. I think we are yet to post that on our website. Next slide, please. So some lessons that we've learned so far, we realized that in being able to come up with a very well-detailed and being able to meet the MPGs, you should be able to have a dedicated team. That is why I must say that the GCAP is very much important to us, because it comes up with how we need to, as a country, do our skills development. So we have a very dedicated team that we have trained in undertaking some of these roles. And we also did a very good planning right from the inception, because if you don't do a good planning, you wouldn't be able to meet most of these deadlines. Coordination of the GAG, NDC, BTR, and then Article 6 team is also relevant. We have teams that have been put together to be able to coordinate the GAG inventory. We also have a dedicated team on the NDC, the BTR development, and then also the Article 6 team. And this was able to help us to be able to come up with a very good BTR document. On the data management tool, we also have a dedicated portal that we do this work on. Thanks to Civet One, we're able to come up with this portal that we keep our data there. And we also have very good tools and models that we have been able to develop based on the IPCC tool. We have been also able to tailor it to suit our own national circumstances. And this is what we use in developing our GAG inventories and even the NDC tracking tool, as well as NDC accounting tool. We also have a good management system in place. We also looking at how we can improve on the methodology for development of our KCA. And so we're looking at development of CBIT 2, where some of the areas for improvement that we have detailed out in our BTR, we'll be able to use that to leverage on getting funding to be able to develop CBIT 2 and then implement those areas of improvement. So Sheila, I think these are some of the lessons that we have learned from the development of the BTR, as well as our GAG inventory, the sixth one. And thank you so much for your attention. Then if there are any questions, I'll take them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Juliana. I think was really interesting to hear all the insights from Ghana, and especially the last slide on the lessons learned. I think that is really also useful for other countries. So thank you really so much. That's it was really interesting. I now give the floor to the audience. If there are any questions, both to Juliana or to the Zimbabwe colleagues, if there are any follow-up questions, some comments. Some thoughts, or maybe also reflecting on your own kind of circumstances in your countries. So the floor is open. You can raise your hand or post in the chat. Everything seems to be really clear today.
That's great. That's good to know.
It was a really good presentation, Juliana. So yes, so maybe colleagues still think or still need to reflect if there's anything. Yes, I'll give you a bit more time to see if there are any follow-up questions for our colleagues. Yes, Sheila, please go ahead.
Yes, so thank you so much, Julian, and the team for the good work that you are doing. Maybe for purposes of learning, would like to really know how you are integrating all these experiences in development of NDC and what you have presented the lessons. How are you integrating them in the process to make your NDC update or development better? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheila. As I indicated earlier on, we really have a very dedicated team when it comes to development of our inventory of our NDC Article 6. And so going into review of our NDC 3.0, we have these teams on standby and they are ready to help us do a good stock taking. And then from the stock taking, we'll progress to do the analytics, and then we'll be able to come up with a good NDC actions for Ghana.
Thank you, Jana. Thank you for elaborating on that. That's very good. And then it's really useful to have dedicated technical teams that are on standby, that are able to then provide the data and the necessary information to do the NDC exercise. Yes, I don't see any other questions from the audience. Nothing in the chat either that I can see. Yes, but yeah, I guess it almost brings us to the end of this webinar, and also to the end of the webinar series. Really, the webinar series on the NDC tracking chapter. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us throughout the series. If you have joined, oh yeah, let me see. Yes, there's a question from Isaac. Yeah, there's a question from Isaac. Just for clarification, are the teams for greenhouse gas inventory, Article 6 and NDC different? I guess it's for you, Jana.
Yeah, we have different teams that work on these thematic areas. However, when it comes to the coordination, it relies on the EPA to do all the coordination work.
Thank you for that. Was that clear, Isaac, or do you have a follow-up question? Okay, this seems to be clear. Good. Yes, it's clear. Okay, perfect. Thank you for the question, Isaac. Really good question. Yes. Yeah, there don't seem to be any further questions. Yes, so yeah, we would like to do a short evaluation with you, just for us to get some feedback on this webinar and the webinar series overall. Also for us to learn and to see how we can improve and how we can be better in those designing those events, designing those experience sharing. Let me quickly share my screen for the Mentimeter. Just a second, colleagues. It's coming up any second now. So we have again a Mentimeter for you. Yeah, you can either use, maybe just use your phone to scan the QR code, or you can go to Menti and enter the code here that is depicted. Yes, I will give you a bit of time to navigate there. Again, we're really curious to hear feedback and your thoughts, any suggestions for improvement. So let me go. So maybe Sheila can also put the code in the chat. Then I can maybe already go to the.
Yes, I have put in the chat.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. So how satisfied are you with this webinar? We are tracking the satisfaction throughout all webinars to really use this for learning and to see if there's room for improvement. I guess there's always room for improvement, but to really really see if this was useful for you. And please be honest. There's no need to to be nice or anything. So please be honest. Yes, we have 4 answers. Thank you so much. 6 answers. There are 8 people online, so wait a few more seconds before we go to the next slide. Yes. Okay, thank you so much for your feedback, colleagues. I will then go to the next slide. How relevant was this webinar for your work? That's also something that we are yeah, that really kind of one of our goals, that everything that we do is relevant to your work, and that somehow that you can integrate it into your everyday work, especially if you're working in the area of transparency, inventory, NDC tracking. Again, please be honest, no need to be nice. This is really important insight information for us. Thank you for the colleagues that have already responded. Just a few more seconds for the others to respond. I can see there are 8 people online or active, so we can maybe increase the answers a bit more. And otherwise, we can also share the survey with you afterwards, and you can also fill it later. Yes, I can see that more people are joining online. Thank you for your feedback. Okay, in the interest of time, let's go to the next section. Next question. What lessons have you learned from the 2 countries as you are developing your NDCs and BTRs? So it's just wanted to hear from what kind of learnings you have from the country experience sharing today, and also a big thanks again to you, Jana, and to the Zimbabwe colleagues for sharing their experience today. This is really highly appreciated. Thank you so much for this, colleagues. You can type any learnings. Article 6 inclusion, that's really interesting from the Ghana case. I think it's really, probably also interesting for more and more countries to embark on the Article 6 journey in accounting. Give you a few more seconds to respond. Yes, you can of course also take your time later into strong teams. That's a very important element. I think always to have strong, dedicated teams that are ready and institutionalized. To do this exercise, to do all these preparations of the BTR as well as the NDC. Thank you so much. Article 6 comes to be quite relevant, so this has been quite noteworthy. And the importance of institutional arrangements. Yes, this is key. Thank you so much, colleagues. Yes, let us move to the next question. Which other transparency topics are you interested in? Something that we could cover in future webinars, on future activities. Something that you would like to have elaborated on that we hadn't covered in this series, which covered basically the NDC tracking part. But if there are other areas that you are particularly interested in and that we could explore future activities in the Anglophone Africa network. Adaptation, yes, that's really key. Adaptation tracking, also MD of adaptation. Thank you for that. Adaptation support, common reporting tables, CRTs, yes. So in this webinars we touched a bit on the CTF tables, of course, but the CRTs for the inventory. It's of course another element. Adaptation reporting. This is also a new area. Support adaptation communication. So really aligned with adaptation reporting. Yes. Thank you so much for that. It seems to be quite clear that adaptation adaptation tracking seems to be a topic of interest among the colleagues here. So thank you so much for that. Let me move to the next questions. So as you know, this was a webinar series. Over 4 months basically, touching on different parts of the NDC tracking chapter. if there's any key takeaway from that, then you can post it here. I'm not sure if you were able to join all 4 sessions, or maybe just today's session, or maybe just 2 or 3 sessions. But any key takeaway that you have from the webinar series that Sheila has organized. Need to tell the team and management to undertake those exercises. Thank you for that. The transparency process is a continuous learning process. Yeah, I think that sums it up quite well. That is a really a process over time with many different challenges and many different technical elements, and it's not a one-off exercise. Countries experience sharing important. Thank you for that. It's really that's good, and we hope to do more of that. So really thank you for our colleagues here to share the experience and take the time for that. Yes, the linkage of NDC with BTR. I hope that also came clear also from Banana's presentation, that it's it's quite an integrated processes, even though it's like 2 different outcomes, the BTR report and the NDC, but it's really integrated. Importance of institutional arrangements and the need for continuous capacity building. Yes, thank you so much for that, colleagues. Yes, so let me navigate to the last question we have. If there's any other comments you have, also, you would like to highlight something that could be improved, something that could be made better, or just any thoughts that you have. And again, we can also share this again after this webinar, so you also have time to think. So if you have anything that you want to highlight or think that can be improved, then and of course share it here with us. Just give you a few more seconds and then we can close. Yes, maybe we also would like more physical meetings. Yes, we all also would love that, to have more physical meetings. The Anglophone Africa training also on the NDC tracking part was just happening last week, and the shells. And yeah, I mean, we usually have 1 regional training per year. Yeah, I mean, we agree physical meetings are more useful best practices to engage other key stakeholders in the process. Okay, that's also really good. Thank you for that. Okay, so maybe in the interest of tools on developing NDCs and BTRs will be great for countries to use. Yes, we take note of that. It's always good with tools. Thank you, colleagues. Let me stop here now. Yes, and thank you all for staying with us, for joining for this webinar series, and for joining today's webinar as well. And thanks
Susan,
again.
there's a question, the last question, that before you wind up, someone put something in the chat.
Oh yeah, sorry, Sarafina, I didn't see that. Please, can you please clarify on the teams for GEG and NDC? I didn't catch it well. I guess it's a question for Juliana from Ghana. But do you mean, Sarafina? If you can also elaborate on your question, if you'd like.
Okay, maybe Susan, what she's trying to ask, Sarafina is trying to ask, is how we have formed the teams. So the EPA as a coordinating entity for these thematic areas has signed MOUs with most of the relevant institutions, and we have focal persons. And so we have GAG focal persons in each of these institutions, as well as NDC focal persons in each of these institutions. And so at the institutional level or at the sector level, they will coordinate the information and then relay it to the EPA for onward compilation when it comes to the GAG inventory as well as the NDC. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Juliana. Thank you for elaborating on this. Was this clear, Sarafina? I hope that touched upon your question. Okay, yes. Thank you so much, colleagues. Thank you for joining us for this whole series, for this webinar today. Thanks again to Juliana and to the colleagues from Zimbabwe on sharing their experiences. We will be posting the materials online, and we will of course also organize future activities. You will hear from Sheila both through email, but also we also encourage you to look at the climate transparency platform, where there's dedicated space for the Anglophone African network. And thank you so much for joining with us. If you have any questions, any need for support, please reach out to us, to Sheila. I think you have your email. That anything that you would like to discuss, please feel free to reach out. We are always available. And thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure, and wishing you all a great afternoon, and stay tuned for future webinars and activities. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, colleagues.
Okay, bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Suzanne.
Bye.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye. Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks. Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys. Thank you.